All right.
Cautiously.
All right. Hi, Mr. James.
Afternoon.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with me. So this is our post-observation meeting. We'll review the observation, but before we begin, we'll go over our meeting norms. So our meeting norms will include, just to make sure that whatever we discuss, it's to provide support and any type of feedback you may have after the end of our process. I'll receive that feedback, and it's a collaboration to make sure that you succeed as an educator and your students succeed as well, right? And at any time during our meeting that you feel uncomfortable or anything that I say may make you feel uncomfortable, just please let me know, and then I
Will
can
do.
stop or ask for clarification. Do you want to add anything to our meeting norms?
Nothing I can think of. That seems pretty reasonable.
Okay, so in our agenda today, we'll just go over the data, the California standards for teachers. You identified 4 and 5, we'll go over that. We'll go over the observation tool that I used during the classroom presentation. After that, we'll interpret the results, then review anything that you feel could have benefited the students more, any strategies you could have used. And then together we'll come up with a process that will benefit the students, so the next time you do teach a similar lesson, you try to implement those strategies, and hopefully they are more effective and our students get more out of the lesson.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
And then at the end, we'll just go over the process and see how you felt about the coaching process.
All right.
Any questions before we begin?
Nope, seems pretty straightforward.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so before we began, we started off with the needs assessment, right? You identified 2 areas of focus, and the first one was the planning, instruction, and designing learning experiences for all students. Okay, so in this tool, you identified that you needed support in. You stated, I am worried that I overcorrect when making differentiation. I also could use help to better document the strategies that you use, right? And the next one was domain 5, where you identified as the need was, I would like guidance in formulating self-assessments for my students. So we're going to do is go over first one, which is CSTP 4. Okay, so I'm looking at that in the classroom observation.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to first look at the differentiation strategies that you used during the classroom lesson. Okay, so how does a teacher differentiate for English learners, students with IEPs, and 504 plans? So what I noticed is in the Think Fast worksheet, you included the worksheet in both English and Spanish. Is that something you usually do?
Whenever I have the opportunity, if the curriculum provides me opportunities or anything in the language of the student that needs it, I provide it. Not all curriculum does that, unfortunately. When I can get translations for it, I'll do that, but that's a very time-consuming process, and it's not something I am capable of because I do not speak another language than English. So a lot of times, like our librarian, Miss B, she'll help me out with it. Otherwise, I use things like Google Translate because you can, I'll have the student snap a picture of it, and it will real-time translate what's on the page. The problem is I don't know how accurate it is.
Okay.
Because I can't read it.
Okay. Thank you. And then the other thing is I noticed is that you have frequent checks for understanding during your lessons, and you use flexible pacing and breaks. And this was very important for students with IEPs and 504s, so I noticed that you do allow that for those students.
Okay, that's good.
As I noticed during the classroom lessons, right? They didn't ask you to get up. They knew that they could get up.
Yeah, they can
take
get
a
up and
quick
move around,
break,
take a quick break.
and then go back to their seat
Yeah.
without causing classroom interruptions.
Because I've got a few who have a real hard time, like just sitting. And I found that if I just let them get up and blow off a little steam real quick, they can come back and they settle back in.
Okay. Okay, so that was good with differentiation strategies. Anything that you want to add that you think you observed when we watched the video
So-
right now?
One of the things that I have a concern about is the frequent checks for understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always concerned I'm doing it too much.
Okay.
did it look like I was doing it too much, or did it look like because I tried to aim for like what feels like the right amount so that they think, so that I'm not doing their thinking for them, but so that if they're really at sea, I can come in and help.
I think it was like the pacing was good. You taught them something, exposed them to some new material, and then checked for understanding. Because this was able, I feel, what I observed, that you were able to see where you needed to focus or reteach some of those concepts that you were teaching or exposing them on the video that they were showing. So I think the pace and the way you did it went well and smoothly. Okay. For a variety of instructional strategies, so the teaching methods that you used during the lesson, you used the video through Mystery Science, you used the flip chart paper, and the vocabulary worksheet. So in the flip chart paper, I saw that as you were writing the words, you were explaining what they were, right? So for different types of learners, that was very effective. And also the vocabulary worksheet that you also handed to them.
Yeah, that one's not technically part of Mystery Science. I always do that because, you know, vocabulary, at this grade level, vocabulary, particularly academic vocabulary, is such a need. And I want to make sure they have that vocabulary because, let's be honest, that's not stuff they're using in their day-to-day talking to their friends. They're not going to talk about the cornea. They're not going to talk about neurons. So they kind of need that extra support, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I always try to make sure if the curriculum doesn't provide me a vocabulary, like an isolated vocabulary list, I always generate that one for myself.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for doing that. Anything you want to add with that? To that?
Other than that, knock on wood, I caught everyone's needs.
Yes. Accessibility of content. So how was the content accessible to all of your students? So I know you mentioned about the translation, Google Translate, but also all students have iPads, right?
Yeah.
So
Everyone has an
for
iPad.
the EL students, they can use a translator during the lesson, so it's less interruption if they need clarification on something, right? Is there ever the case where a student, specifically an EL student, do they ask for clarification during the lesson? Let's just say their translator is not working.
Yes, I've had it. The translation software has gotten pretty good, so it doesn't happen very often.
Okay.
But every once in a while, it didn't happen during this last lesson, but I had a social studies lesson a couple of weeks ago where it happened. Galileo was trying to take a picture of it, and the thing just would not cooperate. So she and I had to kind of have a back and forth over what I meant by, I believe it was the Columbian trade, because we're just getting into the initial stages of colonialism. And she wasn't quite getting what I meant by colonialism. She didn't know what that word meant. So I ended up helping her look up the definition in English, and then we just went into the webpage.
Yes.
And we changed the language to Spanish, and that made it work.
Oh, that's another source. Perfect. So change the language on the website.
Yeah, because Google asks you if you want to change the language, so I just went in, yes, I want to do that.
So that's another resource or accessibility of content that your students have available. And then you also talked about, or I noticed, or I saw the hands-on activities. So this was also able to, for students who learn through touching, through seeing, through experiences. So I think that was really good that you did that. And then one of the things that was very clear, you took your time to simplify the instructions step by step, and they were clear and concise, versus trying to give them too many steps, because I feel that when that happens, students forget like step number 4.
Man,
right?
I'm not good at following 4-step directions. I try to give them about two steps at a time. Let's get to that point, and then we can move on.
Yeah.
I struggle with that, and if I struggle with it, of course they're going to struggle with it.
So I noticed that, like you were very clear, concise, you wanted to make sure they all understood what you meant, and then you continued to the next step. So I think that was also something good. And then the last section for CSTP4 was engagement and student participation. So were students engaged? And I think they were very engaged.
Sometimes a little too much.
They were all eager eager to answer questions.
They're very
and I know-
excited to and honestly, they're like that in almost every lesson. They're very excited. They want me to hear what they think real bad. And like one of the things, this was a personal criticism for myself, was they were so overeager. I was having a hard time hearing what was going on a lot of the times. So much was coming in me at once. It was like, okay, guys, I need you to slow down. One person at a time. I need you to raise your hand, because if you don't, I can't interpret what you're saying. Because if I have 3 different people talking at me, that's all going to blend together, and I'm going to lose it.
All right, is there anything else?
Not that I can think of right off the top of my head.
With engagement, no, good, right.
They were very
Appreciate
excited.
your students.
They had a lot of fun. They really liked that lesson. I think it's how fast you have to grab it. It builds a certain excitement, and I like to do that with it. Like if I can find a way to build excitement, in particularly science, it is my favorite subject. I like to get them into it like that, because if you can get them emotionally invested in it, they'll come along for the academics.
Thank you for that. So this is, I guess, my observations with focus area 4. So now we're going to look at focus area 5, which is assessing student learning. Okay. So the informal assessment, like how did you use your informal assessments during the lesson? So I saw your, go ahead, answer.
Okay, so one of the things I do is circulate.
Okay.
I'm a wanderer in class anyway, because if I can hear the kids, particularly when they're doing like their turn-in talks or their elbow partner talks or just a table talk, I can listen in on what they're saying, because that'll tell me what they're understanding and what they're not. A lot of times, like that's where I'm going to hear if they're misinterpreting something, if they're not understanding a concept. More often than not, somebody at the table can fix it, but this is, if I'm listening and I can hear nobody's catching it, this is when I can jump in and correct it. It's one of the ways I try to keep myself from overcorrecting. Is the first thing I'm doing is listening. Is somebody else at the table able to fix this, or do they need my intervention?
Do you self-correct the students as you're walking around, or do you wait until they finish?
Usually I correct them while I'm walking around, so I'm not like calling it out in front of everyone. Like I'll just lean in and say, okay, so tell me why you think what this is. And I like to ask like leading questions to get them to think about the idea, because a lot of times they'll think about it and all of a sudden they'll hit the point where they're not understanding it, and they'll go, oh, I see what I'm thinking wrong, and then they fixed it for themselves.
And then the other things were hands-on activities. So the activity that you did do, that pair activity, holding the ruler, all students were engaged. So it was really nice
They
to
love
see
that. They love that stuff.
And just they wanted to participate. So it does, you were able to catch to see if who was understanding the concepts or not, and then answering the questions out loud. So this was for your informal assessment. The formal assessment, I see that you had the vocabulary worksheet where they are going to write, the vocabulary worksheet, once they wrote the vocabulary word with the image or drawing of the word, then they are to write a sentence using that vocabulary word.
And we did that at the very end, because it's, technically I need to move that column, but the drawing makes more sense at the end because I can give them more space. But that third column where they write their sentence, I always have them do that at the end of the lesson, because they've encountered the word, they've heard me use it, they've heard the videos use it, they've used it in their discussions with their friends at their table. At that point, then they should be ready to use it in a sentence, and they won't feel too lost doing it.
So this is like right at the end, correct?
Yeah, right at the end.
Okay.
It's the last, it's almost like my exit ticket.
Okay. And then for the last, within your formal assessments, I did see when you asked them to discuss certain content or their understanding with their pair, with their partner, like either in front of them or next to them. So, and I saw you circulating the room with that as well. And then the student self-assessment, I know there's a worksheet that we had discussed to be used, just to see if they understood the assignment of the concepts or if they have still more questions about the content.
That one was interesting, so I administered that to them.
Okay.
This is the first time they've ever used something like that. It's almost the first time I've used something like that. And so we were kind of trying to figure it out together because
Mhm.
they weren't entirely sure how to approach it. They're like, what do you mean I grade myself? No, that's your job, buddy. It's like, nah, not this time. Once they got the hang of it, they really engaged with it. Now, this was the next day
Mhm.
because we weren't able to
Yes.
finish that
Mhm.
while you were here. But they actually seemed like they were really interested in the tool. And from what I could see, they were putting a lot of thought into, like, okay, how did I actually do? Like, because I've always been kind of timid to use one of these, is because my first thought is, oh, of course they're going to give themselves the highest grade they can, and they're going to be, yeah, I'm awesome.
Mhm.
Of course I'm awesome.
Mhm.
I actually didn't see any of that. Like, I did not see a single student just automatically give themselves the highest grade. I had to talk to a couple of them and go, no, kiddo, you did better than that. Come on, have some faith in yourself.
You know a little more. Okay, so this is good that you attempted something where you include self-assessments, because I know that was one of your concerns.
It's
just to
definitely
see.
something I'm going to use again.
But also for them, right, as they're maturing, especially fourth, fifth grade students who are understanding new concepts, but also are they understanding it
Yeah.
or not, you know, and to be able to speak that.
And if you're not, I need you to
Or write
tell
it.
me.
Yes.
And yeah, write it down. Maybe you don't want to say it out loud, but if you write it on that tool, I can look at it and go, oh, okay, you didn't get it, so I know I need to come and help you. But you didn't have to say it in front of everyone,
Yes.
which kind of makes you can be more honest with me on the paper because you don't have to say it in front of all your buddies.
Yes. So that's good that that worked out, at least for a student self-assessment.
Yeah, that one I felt real good about after I issued that. It was pretty cool.
Glad that worked out. And then the last section here for CSTP 5 was feedback and adjustment. Does the teacher provide feedback or adjust instruction based on assessments? So I did see immediate verbal feedback. So that was really spot on as you were teaching. Also circulating the room and checking for student work. You just didn't stay here, you walked around. I know sometimes you'd go fourth, fifth grade, and some of the struggling students, you could tell because as they were struggling, to write some of the stuff down, or you could see their faces and their reactions. You walked around their areas, so that was really good. And then you clarified concepts. I know when they didn't understand a concept, you were able to, I guess, retaught that concept in a different way. So hopefully more students
Oh
will be
yeah,
able
what
to understand.
was the word she was using? Veins.
Yes.
She was using the word veins because, they know veins exist. But it wasn't the proper term. Nerves was what
Yes.
she was looking for. And
Yes.
I remember when she said that, I'm like, interesting, because there is a certain amount of that being an analog. I mean, it just doesn't move blood, it just moves signals. But it's dispersed through your entire body. So it kind of made sense why that was Alexa. Why she was making that particular statement kind of made sense to me when she said it. So it was a lot easier just to go, okay, it's not a vein though, it's this. And I was able to explain
Yes.
how the nerves work as opposed to veins.
Yes. So I really liked how you modeled that and used different examples as you were trying to explain it. And it seems like more students were able to grasp those concepts as you were explaining using examples. And then you did offer differentiated support and scaffolding during your lesson. So I think that sums up our CSTP 5. Do you have any questions or anything you want to add on the areas you wanted to focus on during your lesson? If not, we can continue
Not
to the
that I
next
can
item
think of off the
on
top
our
of my head.
agenda. Okay, so after that, I noticed that again, students were engaged. You used your computer to airdrop the Mystery Science video, and you're able to pause, play the video, explain what's going on, so students stayed engaged throughout, and they have their vocabulary notebook with them. And then at the end, I also saw that students wanted to know more. So I think it's always nice that students learn something but still want to know more, the curiosity.
They are a
goes
very
long way.
curious group. Like, it's not too hard to hook them on something because they're very interested in what we're talking about generally.
Okay, so then at the end, after, I watched the video, they watched together. So some of the areas I think that we discussed, I think it's very important for us to see, like, what was going on, right? Things that I observed that you may have missed, and this is where we can work together. I know there was a student who made a comment, why'd you call on this student? And it was that student's personal opinion.
Which I stone cold didn't hear until we saw
Yes.
that and you pointed that out to me, and I was like, seriously?
And it could happen, right, as you're at different sides of the room. So with this thing is maybe when it is, I guess any type of participation. I know one of the things that we discussed was how to address off-task behavior properly, so it doesn't disengage other students, but also what could we have done together to support these students? And I think that's something that we can discuss after as far as part of our process, as we go into the next step. And then the other thing is, as you were calling on students, like everyone was eager to participate. So if you notice those things, it's maybe change the protocol where you do call on certain students, because now students were feeling left behind, or that you had favorites. I mean, that was my interpretation, or that why'd you choose that student
over me.
And they take it very, like
a lot more personally than honestly than I've really had many classes in the past too. These guys really want my attention.
yes.
And I have noticed even in other lessons that if I call on someone, sometimes they really do kind of like, why are you ignoring me? It's like, I'm not ignoring you. I'm trying to get to everyone.
So I think it, based on especially since you have 4th and 5th, this is a combined lesson. And they were aware that, it was being recorded. I don't know if any of that influenced their participation, or they wanted to participate.
I think to a certain extent, because they were a little more in your face, because they wanted it to be good. They wanted us, I think they both wanted us to have a good experience.
Yes.
And they're like, no, I need to participate so that it can be good for them. And I think they just overcorrected.
Yes.
And got a little too excited.
Yes. So I saw that, and then the other thing is, when you ask students, there was one situation where you said, okay, talk to the person next to you or in front of you. I would suggest maybe being very specific. I know we went over like specific steps, so now very specific to who they talk to on the table, because I saw some students like, who do I talk to?
We're quite sure who they should talk to. Yeah, but that's something I am working on.
And I think they figured it out, but that could have been where
it could have been smoother.
Yes, it goes back to your steps. Like, I feel like if they know, okay, this time I'm talking to the person in front of me, next time I'm talking to the person next to me, so there's less of a choice and more structure, because I feel like when they have that choice, it goes back to favorites, and I don't have a partner, and just a shrugging I saw, but it's all because they want to participate and they want to feel valued in the classroom. So this is what I noticed as far as the learning. And then the other stuff, let's see, just continue to try the self-assessments.
Oh, most
and
definitely.
See how that can help students, just giving them more of personalized growth.
Yeah. I was genuinely surprised by how many really questioned themselves on that. Like, I could really see a couple of them, and some of them I wouldn't have expected it from. Like, really sitting there looking at it going, how well did I understand this? How well did I participate? Like, they were putting genuine thought into that self-assessment, and I was admittedly kind of surprised.
Well, thank you for this. I appreciate that. And then we're going to just look at the data. Was there anything, like, once we looked at the student samples, the work samples, do you feel that there were areas where certain concepts weren't understood, or areas that you feel that you should have focused on more?
I do feel like there's still a little bit of weakness in understanding how the brain interfaces with the nerves, and that's actually something I'm going to expand on in another lesson. later on. It's
Okay.
technically not part of the Mystery Science suite, but it is something I'm gonna do some rewriting for, just, give them a little extra help on understanding how this operates.
Okay. And then, let's see, okay. And then for our classroom practice and reflecting, so what strategies do you feel would have been more effective, or which ones, sorry, let me rephrase that, what strategies were most effective as you taught, like those strategies that you used?
So the ones I know that worked really well was the hands-on learning. They absolutely love that. I get nothing but success from that, generally speaking. I found the self-assessment tool. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was really surprised about how good I felt about that.
Okay. Let's
No
use the
problem.
last one.
Oh, okay, see. Okay, okay. And then, like, how does this, based on this, information or that you shared about what works well, how does it make you feel as an educator in your own practice? Like, do you feel this is something you wanna continue, or is there something that you wanna change or adapt?
I want to keep continuing, again, particularly with that self-assessment tool, because
Okay.
having never really used one of those before, and seeing how engaged the kids were with it, it's like, yeah, this is something I want to explore, and I'm going to be branching it out into other disciplines that I teach. So here I've just used it in science for the first time. I feel like I can get mileage out of this in math. I feel like I can get some mileage out of it in ELA. Honestly, even with the ELD group I work with in small group, I really feel like there's something here. I'm gonna have to rewrite it for that, obviously, but I feel like there's definitely something here I can build off of to where I can use this in more areas.
Okay. And
That
then,
was like a big one for me.
especially since that's an area where you wanted to.
It was something I wanted to work on anyway, because I've always heard about them. I don't think of them.
Okay.
Whereas now I have a tool that I can start to modify to use in other ways.
Okay. And then do you think like any part of your lesson was an equity issue? Like,
How do you mean?
like, let me rephrase that. Do you feel all students, or this lesson was equitable for all students?
I still wish there was more I could do for particularly my newcomer, because
Okay.
I know she has a lot. There's probably English stuff she missed. I don't have access. I don't know if I have access to the videos in Spanish.
Okay.
But see, then I'm afraid I'm gonna isolate her, because she's gonna be sitting there with headphones on, listening to it in Spanish, while everyone else is engaged in English, and I just don't really know how to address that.
Okay. Something we could look further into next time. But these are good questions, because it's like, how do you support the student,
And like,
but also.
well, and that's a big one, because I don't speak Spanish, so I can't just go look at her in Spanish and say, hey, did you catch that? And she can't just look at me and go, yeah, no, it's great, or no, I have no idea what you're talking about, sir.
So based on, I know we talked about the areas where I saw you just glow as a teacher, students were engaged, you used different strategies, especially as you were teaching the lesson, took the time to explain to the students, roam the room, and then the suggestions I made. Is there anything else that you would want to add as far as this process, or that you would like to learn more of in the future, in particular to this lesson and the areas you wanted to focus on?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, you kind of gave me a lot to chew on. Again, I do want to explore more of the self-assessment tools. If you find any more of those that are differently written, I'd love to see them as well,
Okay.
just to give me more ideas on ways I can implement them more frequently.
So do you feel more confident in those two areas after this process?
I do.
Okay.
Particularly, again, because The first one, what was that, 4?
Yes.
Yeah. That one, that's something we
Differentiation.
practice as teachers a lot.
Okay.
I lack a certain confidence in it.
Okay.
5 is something I haven't done before at all. Or like, I think I've seen it done and I've participated in it, but I've never implemented one on my own before this. So for me, that was a big one for me, and that's something I really want to just keep going with.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then, so do you feel this process was effective? And were you surprised at anything you learned about yourself or about the process?
I do feel it was effective. Again, and I technically already said it, but I was very surprised at how effective that self-assessment tool was. Like, I really genuinely expected at least a couple of kids just go, no, I'm great, and I'm done, I don't need to think about it. And I did not get a single solitary one that did that. Like, even ones, because, I know my students pretty well. I had my suspects for who would do that. Nope, they didn't even joke about it. Like, they took that really seriously, way more than I thought they would, which is probably why it made me feel so confident. And it was like, wow, you guys are really like knuckling down and taking this serious. You're not joking around. And that's kind of an impressive thing to watch happen when they've never done it before. I've never done it before. To see something like that work that way was kind of eye-opening.
No, I'm glad it works out like the students benefit as well as you as an educator.
And I really do feel the students benefited just because of the way they thought about it. Like, just looking at them reflect on their own learning, on their own behavior, on their own engagement with the material was really impressive.
Okay. And do you think any part of this process could be improved, the coaching process, or any suggestions?
No, I think you did a nice job.
Okay.
You were real helpful.
Okay, well, thank you, and I'm here as a resource if you ever have any questions. And then I'd like to come back to your classroom, observe just to see if there are any other ideas or how we can collaborate in the future together. Because, the students, they're growing, maturing. I do know your students have a lot of needs and support they may need. But I'm here to support, and I appreciate you taking the time and taking part of this process with me and learning together.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.